Tonight, the grand ballroom of the Fairmont San Francisco Hotel glowed under crystal chandeliers, and the laughter of 200 of the most powerful people in this city. The scent of expensive perfume blended with the sound of violins, the sharp clinking of champagne glasses, and the knowing nods of those who were deciding the very skyline. I sat quietly in the darkest corner, near the emergency exit, in the cream leather wheelchair that Victor once proudly showed off to the press as custom-made in Italy for my wife. My long black silk dress covered the legs that this entire city believed had died 3 years ago. I watched in silence, like a forgotten statue in the middle of the crowd. At 42, Victor, my husband, was still devastatingly handsome. Salt and pepper hair styled to perfection, a custom-made tuxedo fitting him like armor. He moved through groups of people with ease, every handshake closing million-dollar deals, every laugh building political alliances. Victor stepped onto the central stage, silver-gray suit cut perfectly, that confident smile fixed on his lips, the kind of smile that once made investors wire hundreds of millions with a single handshake. Beside him stood Olivia Rhodes, a gold dress hugging her 8-month pregnant belly, shiny blonde hair pinned up high to reveal a smooth white neck and a 12-carat diamond at her throat, the birthday gift I once thought he had bought for me. He wrapped his arm around her waist in a possessive way, his fingers spread wide over the gold silk as if staking his claim. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victor said, lightly tapping his champagne glass. The entire room fell dead silent. "I have wonderful news to share." "I want you to meet Olivia Rhodes," Victor continued, his arm tight around her waist. "She is not only our new creative director, but she is also carrying my child, the future I have always dreamed of." The ballroom erupted in shocked whispers. Camera flashes exploded like lightning. I felt the blood rush to my face when Victor looked straight at me, his expression cold, mixed with pity and contempt. "Sometimes," he raised his glass higher, his voice echoing in the stunned silence, "life gives us a second chance to have happiness." 200 pairs of eyes turned toward me, expecting tears, expecting collapse, expecting the broken woman Victor had spent 3 years creating. He thought he had finished writing tonight's script, humiliating me in front of the entire elite so he could walk brilliantly into a new chapter with his mistress and the son about to be born. But he didn't see. He had never truly seen me in the last 3 years. I raised my champagne glass to my lips, took a small sip, then slowly set it down on the glass table beside me. The soft clink of glass echoed through the brief silence after the applause. I lifted my head, and I smiled. Cold, full of meaning, dangerous. My eyes locked onto his, no avoiding, no begging, not a trace left of the crippled wife he had built in everyone's mind. I saw every tiny change in Victor's face clearly. First, the corner of his eye twitched. Then the perfect smile froze for a second. The hand resting on Olivia's waist tightened until his knuckles turned white. In that brief moment, he realized that tonight's script was no longer in his hands. The room was still applauding, but I knew from that moment on, Victor Langford's honor had begun to crack. And that was only the first crack. 3 years ago, we were once a power couple in the architecture industry of San Francisco. Their luxurious glass house in the Berkeley Hills was a monument to their success. He was a charismatic negotiator who could sell dreams to dreamers, while I was a silent genius with award-winning designs that were reshaping the city's skyline. I remember clearly that July afternoon, when golden sunlight poured onto the tempered glass floor. Victor stood behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, his chin resting on my shoulder, whispering as we looked out over the bay. "Do you see it, Eleanor? This whole city is at our feet." His voice was deep, full of confidence, the kind of confidence that made people ready to sign million-dollar checks without reading the whole contract. I turned back, kissed his lips lightly, and smiled. "No, Victor. The city is in my head. You just have to sell it." We laughed out loud. Our laughter echoed through the open, wall-less space, as if the whole world was laughing with us. The glass house on the Berkeley Hill was the clearest proof of us. 6,000 square feet, not a single column in the middle. The entire front was transparent tempered glass, looking straight out at the Golden Gate Bridge. At night, when the city lights came on, the whole house felt like it was hanging among a million stars. I designed every detail: heated Italian marble floors, an open kitchen with an 18-foot-long island, a master bedroom with a bathtub overlooking the fog drifting lazily across the bridge. Victor only had to choose the wine and invite friends over to show it off. We showed up together everywhere. Charity galas. He held my hand as we walked the red carpet, flashes firing non-stop. International architecture conferences. He stood beside me when I received the Pritzker Young Architect Award, kissed my forehead in front of thousands of people. The press called us the perfect couple, the genius girl, and the blonde American boy who knew how to turn dreams into money. There were nights, after signing a $1.2 billion contract for the Embarcadero Piers project, we came home at 2 a.m. Victor opened a bottle of Dom Perignon 2008, poured 2 glasses, pulled me out onto the glass balcony. The fog was flowing over the bridge like a river of white milk. He raised his glass, looked deep into my eyes. "Eleanor, you are the greatest masterpiece of my life." I believed him. I truly believed him. But magic can turn into a nightmare in the blink of an eye. The accident at the Embarcadero Piers construction site should never have happened. I was obsessed with safety procedures. It was almost a religion to me, and yet. In November, San Francisco was freezing, wind from the bay blowing up, carrying the smell of salt and metal. I wore a black leather jacket, a white hard hat, standing on the temporary floor of level 14 of the Embarcadero Piers site at 7:12 a.m. This project was the child I had carried for 3 years. 12 miles of coastline would be reborn, elevated parks, glass walking bridges, floating restaurants. I was doing a final check of the temporary floor before the presentation to the city council that afternoon. I remember that feeling exactly. My safety boots stepping on the new wooden plank, a very small creak, very normal. I bent down to look at the steel joint. Then everything happened in less than 2 seconds. A dry crack, like someone snapping a big tree branch. The plank under my feet suddenly disappeared. I fell. No time to scream. Only time to see the early sunlight flash on the glass of the building across from me and think a strangely stupid thought. Today, I didn't get to kiss my husband goodbye in the morning. I hit my back on the sand and steel debris below. The sound of my bones breaking rang in my head more clearly than the ambulance sirens later. The fall didn't just break my spine, it shattered everything. I woke up in the emergency room, the strong smell of disinfectant everywhere. First was the sound of the breathing machine, then Victor's voice. He stood by the bed, eyes red, holding my hand so tight it hurt. "Eleanor, my love, I'm here. I'm here." His voice broke, real enough that I believed it was real despair. At first, we weren't sure if she would ever be able to walk again, Dr. Rosario, my neurologist, explained. After 3 surgeries and months of brutal rehabilitation, I could move short distances with a walker, but daily life meant having to depend on a wheelchair. My packed schedule of site surveys and design meetings disappeared, replaced by physical therapy and endless medical appointments. And Victor, the man who had sworn, in sickness and in health, began to withdraw with perfect precision. 3 days after I fell, he held a press conference right in front of the hospital. Black suit, black tie, eyes still red. Hundreds of lenses pointed at him as he held me in the wheelchair, kissed my forehead in front of the cameras. "Eleanor is my whole life. I will stand by her, even if I have to push this wheelchair for 100 years. The cameras caught a tear rolling down his cheek. To the outside world, Victor Miller was husband of the year. He hired the best specialists, remodeled the house to make it accessible, and gave emotional speeches at charity galas about our journey together. "My wife has shown unbelievable courage," he said at events like these, his hand resting on my shoulder like a mark of ownership. "Her resilience inspires me every day." The cameras adored him. The press painted him as a devoted husband, always by the side of his disabled wife. However, behind the luxury design doors, another story was unfolding, and Victor began to change, little by little, so subtle that I doubted myself. First were the brief glances, his eyes sliding over my motionless legs, like he was looking at something broken. Then the soft sighs when he thought I couldn't hear. Then the nights he came home late, the smell of strange perfume clinging to his suit. I asked, "Victor, do you still love me?" He sat down on the edge of the bed, stroked my hair, smiled gently, his voice sweet like honey. "Silly you. I love you more than anyone in this world. I'm just trying to keep everything from falling apart." I nodded. I swallowed it down. I told myself I was imagining things because of the painkillers. But every night, when he thought I was asleep, I heard him standing out on the balcony, whispering on the phone. "Yeah, she's fine. No, she won't be able to walk anymore. Yeah, we'll have more time." I lay there, in the dark. The real nightmare wasn't the fall from the 14th floor. The real nightmare was realizing the man who once said he would push my wheelchair for 100 years had started counting down the days to throw that wheelchair away. Along with me. At charity galas and company events, I found myself standing behind flower arrangements or in corners, watching Victor perform his magic tricks with investors and city officials. I became a prop in his show, the inspirational wife who had overcome tragedy, wheeled out when the cameras appeared, then quietly moved aside when the real work began. From then on, everything changed millimeter by millimeter, so slowly that I thought I was going crazy. The 12-seat dining table, where we used to sit close at the head, laughing, pouring wine for each other. Now he sat at the far end, a whole mile of walnut wood away from me. I had to call out, "Victor, can you pass me the salt?" He didn't look up from his iPad, just muttered and called the housekeeper's name. Dinner parties at home. Guests were all mayors, investors, tech stars. I used to be the center, everyone gathering around to ask me about new projects. Now my wheelchair was pushed into a dark corner near the kitchen door. I looked over the shoulders of expensive suits, saw Victor standing in the middle of the room, wine glass in hand, laughing loudly, telling stories without mentioning me once. A polite guest turned and asked, "Where's Eleanor, Victor?" He laughed it off, patted the person's shoulder. "Ah, she's tired. Let her rest a bit." I was there, less than 10 meters away, but already invisible. My phone vibrated with a message from Martina, my physical therapist, one of the few people who still treated me like a whole human being. "Don't forget to take your medicine at 10, okay? How are you?" Looking at Victor talking to guests, I texted back, "I'm almost invisible." Martina replied, "They're the losers. Want me to fake an emergency to rescue you?" Those funny moments helped me stay sane as my world kept shrinking. In the company, my name was slowly removed from everything. The brass sign at the front door used to say Bennett and Langford Architects. One morning, I saw workers changing it to Langford and Associates. I called him. "Victor, why did you remove my name?" His voice over the phone was careless. "The brand needs to feel fresh, you understand? You can't really participate anymore anyway." The monthly board meetings. He used to push me into the meeting room, seat me right beside him. Now the secretary emailed, "This week's meeting will be online, Ms. Eleanor. Please rest and take care." I was still a 49% co-owner of the company, but I was no longer invited, no longer asked, no longer existed. The nights he came home late, the smell of women's perfume on his collar. I asked, "Late meeting?" He took off his suit jacket, threw it in the corner, snapped, "Why are you controlling me? I'm trying to keep this company from collapsing. Who do you think is paying for your hospital bills, your medicine, your caregiver?" I stayed silent. Some nights he drank too much, sat on the sofa across from me, eyes bloodshot. He stared at me for a long time, then sneered, "Looking at you like this, I can't believe I ever loved you that much." I froze. "What do you mean?" He shrugged, stood up, walked past me like walking past a table. Nothing, it's just life changes. The master bedroom door closed. From then on, he slept separately. I was moved down to the ground floor living room for convenience. I began counting the days I became decoration in the very house I designed. Every morning I woke up, I looked at the glass ceiling, saw clouds drifting, saw the Golden Gate Bridge still as beautiful as ever. But the man who once said he would push my wheelchair for 100 years now only pushed me out of his life, little by little, gently, politely, and impossible to resist. The morning after another humiliating charity dinner, I woke up in an empty house. Victor had left early, only leaving a note. "Breakfast is in the fridge. Agnes will come at 10 o'clock. Don't forget your medicine." I crumpled the note and made my own coffee, stronger than the watery kind the housekeeper made. While sitting in Victor's home office, searching for project files I was supposedly still reviewing, my phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. "I'm sorry, but you deserve to know the truth about your husband." My heart pounded as I opened the attached photo. In the picture, Victor had his arm tightly around a beautiful young woman with a clearly visible, pregnant belly, walking out of what looked like a private clinic. The timestamp was from the day before, when Victor claimed he was in back-to-back meetings. That image burned into my mind. That night, I faced him calmly and precisely. "Who is Olivia?" I asked simply. Victor's hand paused mid-air as he took a sip of scotch. "Olivia Rhodes, our new project manager." "Why?" I showed him the photo. Victor's face went stiff, but he didn't look surprised. "Are you following me?" His voice turned ice cold. "Someone sent it to me." Victor's laugh wasn't funny at all. "And you immediately jumped to the worst conclusion. That's your problem, Eleanor. You've become so bitter." "She's pregnant, Victor." "Yes, and her husband is very happy." The lie came out of his mouth easily. "I took her to a checkup because she felt unwell. As her mentor, I was very worried." I looked straight into his eyes. "Which husband?" Victor laughed loudly, his voice echoing through the cold glass space. "Rhodes. Who else? Did you forget? Olivia got married last year, wedding in Napa. You even sent flowers." I stayed silent. I remembered clearly. There was no wedding in Napa. I was the one who approved the company's gift list last year. There was no Olivia Rhodes in the married section. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my wheelchair, opened the old laptop Victor had kindly left me to keep me from getting bored. I logged into the company HR system with my old account that he forgot to revoke. I found Olivia Rhodes' file. Marital status, single. I stared at that line until the letters blurred. Then I opened the year-end gift folder. No wedding flowers, no Napa, nothing at all. I started to shake, not because of the cold, but because for the first time in years, I realized, the man sleeping behind a glass wall from me was lying to my face, not even bothering to invent a decent story. From that moment, I stopped asking. I stopped crying. I started watching. I began to investigate in silence, showing no expression on my face, changing none of my daily habits, still sitting in the wheelchair with a thin blanket over my knees like a piece of furniture with no voice. But inside, every joint of my thinking operated like a machine, precise and cold. The first person to realize I was still there was Martina, the physical therapist. She grabbed my wrist when I unconsciously held my balance longer than usual and whispered softly, "You haven't lost control at all. What are they doing to you?" I only looked at her, and that was enough. From that day on, Martina secretly kept my original medical files before the edited copies were uploaded into the system. Diane, the only person in my old company who still believed in my ability, sent me access to an old server, where my designs had been renamed to Victor, and the dates changed to turn me into a shadow. Then I hired a private investigator, a man who didn't ask too many questions, who only needed one look into my eyes to understand this wasn't some ordinary affair. And piece by piece, the truth began to appear like blades cutting into flesh. The pills I took every night. The ones Victor always personally placed in my palm and softly said, "Take it. You need to rest." Turned out not to be nerve recovery medicine, but low-dose sedatives that caused drowsiness, slowed my thinking, and erased short-term memory. More than $8 million from the Horizon Care Charity Fund were withdrawn in small batches, funneled through a chain of shell companies and poured straight into a glass-front penthouse facing the bay, where Olivia lived, where sheer curtains floated in the wind as if no other woman had ever existed. And the final blow smashed straight into my chest until I couldn't breathe was the video from the construction site camera. 6:18 in the morning, on the day of the accident, Victor stood on the 14th floor, bent down to inspect a cracked floor beam, his hand very calm, not panicked, not rushed. Then he pulled a thick envelope from his briefcase and neatly placed it into the worker's hand. That man looked around once, nodded very slightly, and exactly 3 hours later, I fell into that empty space. When I finished watching that video, I didn't cry, didn't shake, didn't smash anything. I only leaned my head back against the chair, felt my heart beating very slowly, very heavily, and in my head there was only one sentence, cold as metal. So, I didn't survive an accident, I survived a conspiracy. The irony was that Victor himself dug the final hole for himself to fall into. One evening, he came home with an unusually excited face, taking off his coat and talking as if he were giving me a gift. "This year, I want to hold the company gala here, at home. It will be very meaningful. People will see you, see me, see that we are still fine." I looked at his back reflected in the glass and clearly heard the words, "See you," spoken like a polite way of saying, "See your collapse." And at that very moment, I understood. He wanted to use the house I designed as a stage to humiliate me, to publicly display the pitiful, crippled wife, to stand next to Olivia, and still look like the noble man who had stayed out of duty. Fine. If he wanted a stage, I would give him a performance he would never forget. From that day on, I began to quit the pills. Martina was the only one who knew. We replaced Victor's sedatives with vitamins in identical capsules. Every time he placed the glass of water and the pill into my hand, I swallowed, smiled, and waited for him to turn his back and leave the room. Then waited another 5 minutes to make sure he had gone downstairs, then spat the pill into a tissue. The first clear feeling after months of fog came like a cold slap to the brain. Painful, dizzying, but it also made everything around me sharp again. In the physical therapy room, Martina locked the door, drew the curtains, set up 2 parallel bars, and said, "All right, Eleanor, not to prove anything to them, but for you to take back your own body." The first time I stood up from the wheelchair, both hands gripping the stainless bars until my knuckles turned white, legs shaking like they weren't mine, sweat running down my spine. I took 1 step, then 2, and collapsed to my knees. Martina helped me up, didn't comfort me, only said, "Tomorrow we do it again." We repeated that weekly, then daily. While at home, in front of Victor, I still sat quietly in the wheelchair, still let him push me across the transparent glass panels, still listened to him tell guests, "She has no feeling from here down," and clenched my teeth to keep from laughing. 2 months before the gala, I could stand without holding on for about 10 seconds. 1 month before the gala, I could walk from one end of the training room to the other with a cane. 2 weeks before the gala, I turned on a small light in the living room at 3 in the morning, the whole city below my feet like a glowing map. Victor slept in the study, the door half closed. I placed my hand on the back of the sofa, slowly stood up, bare feet touching the cool concrete floor, and took the first steps in the very house where for so long I had only moved on wheels. Every footstep sounded very soft but clear, like the final strokes on a drawing already complete. And when I stopped in front of the glass wall, looked at my own reflection, not a disabled woman in a chair, but a woman standing upright, breathing evenly, eyes no longer afraid, I understood that the biggest secret here was not the evidence I had against him, but the fact that, for all the final months before the night at the Fairmont, the whole world thought I was tied to a wheelchair. Only Martina and I knew I was ready to stand up under his lights and turn the trap he built for me into the stage for his own execution. The gala night at the Glass House began like a perfect performance in Victor's mind. 8:40 p.m. Warm yellow lights covering every glass surface, soft jazz music flowing from speakers hidden in the ceiling, guests standing in small clusters, red wine glasses, laughter, stories about projects, money, power. I sat where Victor had, thoughtfully, prepared for me. A beautiful corner for everyone to conveniently pity. The wheelchair facing the temporary stage built in front of the largest glass wall in the house. Behind me, the whole city burning with light. And exactly when the wall clock pointed to 8:40, the front door opened. Olivia appeared like a rehearsed answer to the question, "New happiness." She wore a dress hugging her pregnant belly, satin fabric reflecting the light, making the round belly even more obvious, hair softly curled, hand resting on her lower back. People around instinctively turned their heads. Victor stepped into the foyer to greet her, arm around her waist, leaned down, whispering something in her ear. Olivia laughed, tilted her head onto his shoulder. That whole frame appeared very clearly through the glass opposite me, like a slow-motion scene, and I noticed furtive eyes glancing toward me and then quickly looking away. 9 o'clock sharp, Victor clapped his hands twice, signaling the band to lower the volume. Lights softened and focused on the stage area. He adjusted his tie, stepped up to the podium, arm still around Olivia's waist. The microphone clicked once. Then his voice spread through the space, deep, familiar. "Thank you all for being here tonight, in the house that Eleanor and I built, to celebrate a new milestone with us." He pronounced the words "Eleanor and I" very properly, like a learned courtesy, but his hand tightened lightly around Olivia's waist, as if marking new territory. After a few sentences about company achievements, about buildings, about the future, Victor changed tone. "And tonight, I want to introduce to you the person who will